Howdy and welcome to Bamberger Ranch. My name is Aldo Leopold. I'm the director of the Texas A&M Natural Resources Institute, and we're going to continue our Leopold Live series here at Bamberger, continuing to talk about the 5 basic tools introduced by Aldo Leopold, the father of wildlife management. These 5 tools include cow, axe, plow, fire, and gun. And what we hope to do in the upcoming months is show you how those tools can be applied, but with very specific projects and objectives. And so with me is Dr. April Sampson. She's the executive director of Bamberger, and she's going to tell us a little bit about Bamberger and what we hope to cover in the series.
Great. Thank you so much, Roel. We're really excited to have you and your colleagues from the Natural Resources Institute back here at Selah Bamberger Ranch Preserve. And we're excited about continuing our journey into Leopold Live version 2. Like Roel said, we'll be providing more detail and more useful information regarding the 5 tools that Aldo Leopold championed. Here at Selah Bamberger Ranch Preserve, we're a 501c3 nonprofit organization, and our mission is landowner stewardship, outreach, and environmental education. So we have many Central Texas school children that come visit us every year for hands-on science-based environmental education lessons, and we also lead showcase tours and workshops for landowners interested in practicing restoration and good land stewardship. So we're very happy to be partnering with Natural Resources Institute, and we know that you'll benefit a lot from the information that we are going to be talking about during this new version of Leopold Live.
So let's go ahead and get started.
Great.
Welcome back to another segment of Leopold Live. Once again, my name is Stephen Fulton. I'm the manager of the great and wonderful Bamberger Ranch Preserve. And today our topic is about beekeeping. It's not really not so much a wildlife topic because our honeybees are considered domestic animals. More so to speak, I guess they're wing stock, domestic wing stock. There is a lot of interest in this area across the state about acquiring an ag valuation through beekeeping. You should definitely confer with your ag appraiser, your tax appraiser on the subject, or you can refer to our previous segment where we interviewed our tax appraiser for Blanco County. But just some simple facts for Blanco County. You have to have a minimum of 5 undeveloped acres. So say you bought a 5.5 acre place and you either built a home on it or you had a home when you bought it. That won't quite qualify because they consider that house, that homestead, and the shop or whatever that's unattached, they consider that as 1 acre of developed land. Doesn't matter if it sits on a 1/2 acre, they still consider it a 1 acre of developed land, and therefore you'd only have 4.5 acres of undeveloped land. That won't quite qualify to meet that minimum acreage requirement. A maximum acreage of 20 acres. So if you have more than 20 acres of undeveloped land, either develop it. No, I'm not saying that. You may have to seek out other ag production to get to acquire your ag valuation. Now, if you have that between 5 and 20 acres of undeveloped land, and you want to go through the process of beekeeping to gain your ag valuation, it's a requirement of 5 hives. Okay, so 5 beehives on your property, if it's in that range of acreage. So I enjoy beekeeping. I love it. I can talk to you about how we manage bees here, how what I do when I get into the hives. I can talk to you about it for days. keep an eye on our website. We are going to start offering workshops in the spring, at least one a year that has to do with beekeeping, and make the little bird watching or bird ID in there too, so we can call it, you know, the Birds and the Bees workshop. Anyway, back to beekeeping. So there are some basic equipment you're going to need when you start with beekeeping. Usually, when you buy your bees, there are certain. Let me back up. There's several methods. There's several ways that you can purchase bees. You can purchase them from producers where you buy just the bees. Okay, and they'll come in a box similar to this, a screened-in box. They will have a can of a can that's full of sugar water so the bees will stay alive in transit. This will be down in here just about like that. Okay. There will be a little tiny box that's screened on one side and has an opening in one end. Now that opening will be full of a candy plug. And then on the outside of that candy plug, in this hole, will be a cork plug. The queen will be in here, okay? And they'll have it hanging inside here from a piece of strap. So it'll be hanging in here like this with the can over top, okay? Where the bees inside the box will in transit, will get accustomed to her pheromones, will accept her as their queen, and they'll also take care of her, because the queen is the queen. She doesn't do anything. Her whole job is to lay eggs. Okay, she does a little communicating with the rest of the hive, but for the most part, her job is to make babies. She will already come bred, so they only need to breed one time, and they're fertile for the rest of their life. They will lay eggs until they get too old and die. So when you get a package of bees like this, you want to have your hive set up, and we'll get to the hive parts and how to set that up in just a few minutes. But you'll take the queen box out, you'll take the jar out as you know, as well as you can without letting too many bees escape, and then you'll shake the bees into the hive. It's pretty simple. It seems a little violent, but trust me, you're not going to injure the bees, and you got to get them out of that box. They need to go out of that box into there. If there's still some bees left in there after you've given it a good shake and you can't quite get them all out, just set the box near the hive. You'll have that queen will be between a couple of frames in the hive when you button it all back together. When you put it all back together, they'll smell that. They'll smell that pheromone coming out of that hive, and the bees will come out of this box and go into that hive. But you want to try to get the majority of the bees out of the box into the hive. So that's packaged bees. You can buy those in like 3 pounds or 5 pounds. They're expensive. Buying bees is expensive. Sorry. There's no other way around it. Now you can go the inexpensive route by catching your own bees. Wild hives, and that's how I got started. Unless you're okay with getting stung a few to a lot of times, that might not be the way you want to go. But you will learn a lot about keeping bees if you catch your own bees and keep them alive. You can also buy bees in a nuke box. It's a nuclear hive box. Basically, what it will have is it'll have a bunch of bees like you would get in the packaged bees, but also have 5 frames of resources. So that's like cheating. That's getting ahead of the curve. These guys, they gotta build all their comb. They gotta collect the resources. So it takes these a lot longer to get established versus if you buy them in a nuke box. Now the trade-off is this is a little more expensive to buy them in a nuke box. If I would advise, if you're going to buy bees in a nuke box, buy them in a 5-frame nuke box, not a 3-frame nuke box. So what you'll get in a 5-frame nuke box should be at least 2 frames of brood. That's baby bees. Now you need those because that's your next generation. You got to have the baby bees to take care of the queen. You should have 2 frames or 3 frames of. It can be 2 frames of honey. It can be 2 frames of pollen, 1 frame of honey, but you should have those 3 remaining frames should be a mix of pollen and honey that they've stored, that the hive stored up, that they robbed the nuke from. So, and it's very easy with these, okay? The queen will already be loose. She'll be running around there with the rest of the bees. This will come buttoned up. So say I'm making a nuke here off of one of my hives, like you see this one behind me. I'll make sure the queen's in there, and I'll leave it out here on the ranch until the day I want to take it to sell. So she'll be in there. She won't leave, and there'll be plenty of worker bees in there to help collect resources and take care of the queen. But before I send it off to whoever's bought the hive, we'll plug it up. We'll plug up the hole. There's some ventilation. A lot of times I will drill some more ventilation just to make sure they don't get too hot in transit. But I'll plug that entrance up so bees won't escape in somebody's car. That's never a good thing to have a bunch of bees, in your SUV with you. Not great. All right, so you can also buy full size hives, but again, the more resources you get, the more equipment you buy, the more expensive it's going to be. So everybody has their own prices. So you bought your bees. Hopefully, before you bought your bees, well, first thing you need a bee suit or a bee jacket. This is what I use. I run a little hot, so I got a ventilated jacket. It's basically 3 layers of screen, 2 of a mesh type material. The middle layer being kind of almost like a foam rubber layer that keeps the other 2 layers, or the outside layer, far enough away from my skin where the little stingers can't reach through it. So it's almost bulletproof. Not quite. There's nothing that's 100% bulletproof. But anyway, it's just a jacket. I'll just wear good sturdy blue jeans. Jacket. You can buy the real heavy duty gloves, but I don't like to use those. I have used them. If I ever get back to where I just feel like I need to be stung a bunch by collecting a wild hive, I will wear those because you get stung less. But with my bees that's already established in my hives, I will use just nitrile gloves. Okay? What this gives you is dexterity. You can feel everything, right? You can get around that frame with just your fingers and pull it out of there. Those gloves, they're just clunky, right? It's hard to feel anything. Bees won't sting. Or the only time I've been stung through these nitrile gloves is if I've accidentally, squished a bee between my finger and my hand and the side of the hive or a frame or something like that. And then anytime you confine a bee to that point, they're going to sting because they can't fly away. Okay, so once you have your jacket, other tools you'll need is a hive tool. Okay, I have a couple examples here. There's others. This kind is okay. I prefer the J hook would be a hive tool. It has cutting blades here for peeling off wax, cross comb, that sort of thing, and it has that J hook to really pry out the frames. And I'll show you how that's used in just a minute. So when we go to buying, the hive equipment, the actual structure that is the hive, not the bees. There's a couple of ways you can go. And I'll tell you about the way that I don't recommend. I have been very successful with top bar hives. I've raised bees. I've kept bees in top bar hives. My only issue with top bar hives is they're just a lot more difficult to maintain and do the things that I need to do as a beekeeper. And granted, it may be better for the bees to be in a top bar hive, and maybe it's more natural for them. But as far as management, and if you only have 4 or 5 hives, that's fine. That's great. You'll have the extra time to spend maybe on. But when you have 20 hives or 25 hives, that extra time that it requires to manage a top bar hive, it's just not feasible for me. Another thing with the top bar hives is, so this is the top bar, okay? This sits right on top of your kind of a triangular prism type box, right? They build the comb on this edge, and then it hangs down in a U shape from there. Problem with that is you got, for the first inch or so, you got comb that's actually attached to a wooden structure, so it's strong. But from this point down, it's just comb attached to comb, and it's not that strong. So as you're going through that top bar hive and managing it, if there's any kind of cross comb between the layers of comb, you could lose that whole top bar. That comb could just rip off. So you got to be very gentle. You got to be super careful, which all that takes time that I don't have. So I don't use top bar hives here for that purpose. But there's a lot of people that are successful with top bar hives. I was successful with top bar hives, but I had to give it up when I decided to have a few more hives, just from time constraints. So from top bar hives, this is tried and true technology. This is a Langstroth hive. What I'm showing you here is 2 deep supers. So they have deep supers, medium supers. My toolbox here is made out of a medium super, so you see with the difference in the depth of it. And then they even have shallow supers. I am phasing out the medium supers. I don't have any shallow supers, and I'm actually phasing out the medium supers. The medium supers are great for somebody that doesn't have as much upper body strength as I got. I'm a bit of an ogre, so I can handle a heavy load. And so when you have this deep super and it's filled full of honey, capped honey, all 10 frames is filled with capped honey, then that gets quite heavy. And that can be as much as 200 pounds heavy, 150 easily. So that takes some muscle to be able to handle that kind of weight. So the shallow boxes with the shallow boxes with the shallow frames, the medium boxes with the medium frames, it just basically it's a weight difference. So you get a medium super like this full of honey, frames of honey, it's going to weigh 100 pounds. A shallow frame tops maybe 75 pounds, maybe 60 pounds. As far as the honey production, the bees really don't care. The only thing is with your medium and your shallow supers, you will run out of room quicker. And if you don't keep an eye on that, as they fill up those supers with resources, and once their house is totally full of honey and they have no more room for brood, Mama's going to say, we got to find a bigger house, and she's going to lead the whole hive. They're going to swarm. They're going to leave. They're going to go find a bigger house, and then you lost your bees. So that gets into this is just a migratory inner cover. Some people use these, some people don't. I use them just because it gives me a little more insulation. This is your cover, your lid. This one is a nice one. It has a metal top, so it galvanized metal top, so it won't rust. It helps protect the wood that's underneath from rotting in. However you want to say it. I'll put this down here. All right, and we'll get some up close pictures of this in just a few minutes. But this is a frame that I pulled out of my freezer, and I'll talk about storage of comb, extra comb, things like that here in just a minute. This is a frame that's got some comb built out on it. One thing to keep in mind is that comb is the most expensive thing for bees to produce. It takes between 7 and 9 pounds of nectar to produce 1 pound of comb. Think about that. So once you have that comb, you want to make sure that you keep it in production, or you keep it stored somewhere where the wax moths can't get to it. Wax moths are the bane of the existence for bees and their comb. They will destroy comb, and they can kill hives. So this is a frame. These are 10 frame Langstroth hives. You can also buy 8 frame Langstroth hives. Same thing, it's a difference in weight. So when you're managing it, if you don't quite have the upper body strength, and you want to go with a deep super, you can go to an 8 super. But the same thing with the shallow supers, you're going to run out of room quicker. So you got to keep a closer eye on them, so to add that room when it's necessary. So I buy these frames unassembled, and I assemble them myself with just some staples, some good high quality glue, exterior grade glue, to assemble the top and bottom with the sides. I buy the grooved top and bottom frames from Man Lake. Remember that name, Man Lake? They have a lot of good bee stuff. Not to say that there's not other companies out there that do, but I use Man Lake almost exclusively. I buy their Wax Right foundation. So this is it's a plastic foundation. And it comes with, it's been coated with wax, so it already smells like comb, even though it doesn't really look like comb yet, but it has the pattern printed on there, so the bees don't have to be as great of engineers. They've already got a foundation to build off of. And it just, like I just showed you how I took it out, it just snaps into the frames. Pretty simple, if I can get my fingers to work right today. Yeah, just like that. Now, I mostly buy black, but there was one time that they didn't have black available, so I bought some yellow. No difference. The bees don't care about colors. Once you put the top on there, guess what? They can't see color because all light's gone. It's all just black then. The reason why I prefer the black foundation is simply because when I'm looking to see if a queen is healthy or see if she's even still in there without finding her, if I'm looking for fresh laid eggs, 1 to 3 day old eggs, they'll be tiny little white specks. Well, that white against this black background is a whole lot easier to see versus the white against the yellow background. So it's just a visibility thing for me. So you'll have these 10 frames in there. Like I said, when you buy package bees, you will take this can out as easy as you can. You can turn it upside down, give it a little jiggle, get that can started coming out. But what I'd do is I would ease it out like that, and then kind of move it like that across the top and cover it with my hand at the same time. Again, trying to keep all the bees in there. Then you got to work that queen cage out. That's going to be hanging down inside that box, about like so. So you got to work that out to get your queen out. Then I would cover that up either with a piece of wood or maybe put the can back in there. I'd use my hive tool to take that cork out to expose that candy plug. Now I'd put that down in there with the hole facing down, but I usually put it at like a 45-degree angle, about like that, between the frames, about the middle of the hive. Kind of squish the hive frames together where it holds that box in place. Get it down there where it won't be in the way of your inner cover. Grab the bees, shake them in there, set that aside out over there somewhere, button it back up. Try not to squish very many bees. You just paid a lot of money for those, so you don't want to squish them. Then you're ready to go, except for you're not ready to go. When you first introduce bees to a hive like this, you're going to want to feed them. Okay, so say you've just introduced your bees to your hive. You're not done. You're not done. Some of this is pre-work, some of it is post-work, but you're going to want to feed your bees. Okay, depending on the time of year, determines what concentration of sugar water you want to feed. Okay, during most of the year, so spring and summer, which is, you know, around here summer's like 8 months. Okay, we get a month for spring and a month for fall, and the rest of it, and we get, what, you know, 2 months of winter, maybe, hopefully, if I'm lucky. Maybe the other way around. Anyway, so you want to feed the bees during the spring and summer a 1-to-1 mix, so 1 part sugar, 1 part water. In the fall and winter, you want to switch to a 2-to-1. That's 2 parts sugar, 1 part water. In the wintertime, it's a little more difficult for them to evaporate that mixture to get it down to honey that they can actually use. So bees really can't eat. They really don't eat nectar. They collect nectar, and so the sugar water is the same thing. You're just mimicking nectar. They're collecting it, and then they bring it to the hive. They store it in the combs, and then they fan it to dehydrate it to make it for it to become honey. And then they eat the honey. All right, this is a long process. So I got a variety. I got a couple of different types of feeders here. There's other kinds of feeders as well. One type that I don't have here is what's called a super feeder. So it's basically the same as either a shallow super or a medium super. So it's in the whole thing as a feeder. So you can put 5 gallons of feed in there if you want to. I don't ever try to feed that much, because if they're not really needing it, if they just need a little bit of feed and not a lot of feed, if you put that much sugar water in there, it's going to turn bad before they use it. It's going to sour. So the max I feed at a time is about 1 gallon at a time. That's what this is. This is what I recommend. This is what I use almost exclusively. This is a frame feeder. So basically it takes the place of a frame inside the super. So basically you have a bucket, a frame-shaped bucket. It has a wooden top to it with some basically like rubber bands that's holding that wood down, so, and keeping that plastic against that wood so no bees can squeeze through. Then you have these ladders, they call them ladders, that go down in here. So as the bees feed it, they can just keep going down the tube to access that sugar water until it's totally empty. Boardman feeders, which are the feeders that you get that go on the front of a hive, it's basically this is a quart size mason jar with the feeder. So this sits in here at an angle, to where as the sugar water drips out of these tiny perforations, it can run, if they're not eating it. As soon as it drips out, it'll run against the back of this and kind of sit there as a little pool of sugar water, and then they'll eat it up. The one issue I have with these is it's harder for the bees to protect that resource because it's on the outside of the hive, and you may actually encourage robbing from another hive that will rob out this hive, because they're smelling that food, and they're trying to get in there, and if they're hungry enough of the bees from the other hive can actually overpower your hive and not only drink the food, but then they'll rob out all the honey and the resource that's inside that hive and basically kill out your hive. So that's the only issue that you can have with that. But if it's a good strong hive, they can defend it easily enough. If I do use these, when I do use them occasionally, I will make sure to reduce that entrance with an entrance reducer down to a very small area. That way the guard bees have a much smaller area to defend. They'll be more successful at defending that hive. And most of my hives are reduced down pretty much all the time. Especially this year, because it was a drought year. We had a lot of robbing happening, a lot of robbers out there, burglars if you want to call them that. And it's just other bees that are hungry. And if you got a bee out there, a wild hive out there that's stronger than your hive, that's normally who wins the battle. The stronger force. All right. So again, talking about reducing the entrance of your hive. You can buy these blocks that are set up to reduce the hive. You can reduce it down to where you got this distance for an entrance, for an entrance and exit, or you can rotate it to where you have just this smaller part that is your entrance and exit. I have a few of these, but I usually just cut me some 3/4 by 3/4 strips of whatever lumber I have around, and I'll have them in varying sizes. That way I can just kind of shove them in there and create the opening that I want, whether it's 3 inches or just 1 inch or somewhere in between. Now, also with feeding the bees, technically you don't have to add a supplement to it all the time. It is good to add a supplement to them when they're using a lot, when they're like a dry summer like this year. I had to feed a lot. So the more you feed, because that sugar water is not the same as nectar. There's all kinds of good stuff in the nectar that keeps their digestive health, keeps them healthy with their digestive tract. So you can get this additive, and it basically has a bunch of essential oils in it, just other plant stuff, right? I add a little bit of that, the recommended amount, to my 20 gallons of sugar water that I mix up at a time, just to keep them healthy. Other things you can feed them, and I also recommend feeding them some sort of a pollen or pollen substitute. What I have here, and it's a bit messy, so that's why I have it on a piece of paper. It's called a pollen patty. You can get those. I get them in a big 40-pound box. Whether you feed just a little bit of that, I'll usually cut it in at least thirds, and it's almost like it's a little thicker than peanut butter. It's kind of a messy thing, but I'll just kind of stick it to the top of the frames, check it in a few days, and if they've eaten it up in a few days, I may give them a little more. If they haven't, then I'll just wait until they get it all eaten up. You can also buy pollen in powder form or granulated form, and you can build feeders out of PVC for that, or you can buy feeders to feed that pollen. Bees need pollen. Pollen is a protein. That's their steak and eggs, right? Honey, that's their sugars. That's their carbs. They need them both. During the times of year when the bees are growing a lot of brood, they need a lot of pollen, because that protein is what makes healthy babies. So during the early spring, when the nectar flow has started and the bees know that extra resource is out there, the communication in the hive, they tell mama, hey, you got to make more babies. And if she doesn't get busy making more babies, they will off with her head. They don't actually cut her head off, but they will kill her, and they'll build another queen from some of the eggs that's in there. So any egg that's in that hive can become a queen. It just depends on the diet they're fed. But anyway, I kind of got a little bit off subject, but because I like bees. But pollen substitute or actually granulated pollen during times of year is very beneficial to the bees, especially when you just introduced a new hive or new bees to a hive. Let's see, what else do I have here? As far as introducing a nuke box, that's really easy. You just take out your frames of just foundation out of your hive, and you replace it with the frames that's be full of bees and resources. You put all that in there, put the brood towards the middle, resources towards the outside, and cross your fingers, hope for rain, hope for some nectar flow, or get busy feeding them. Okay? Now, say you've been at this beekeeping stuff for a little while, and you're starting to extract honey, and you got extra frames of comb. You don't want to just leave it laying around willy-nilly, because the wax moths will destroy it. And again, that's the most expensive things for bees to produce is the comb. I prefer to store it all this extra comb that I have, frames of comb that I have. I prefer to store it in a freezer. But if you don't have 8 freezers like I got, then you can store it just outside on a porch or in your shop. But you want to use a little of this paramoth. It comes in a crystallized form, which turns into a gas. which keeps the moths out. So think of mothballs. It's a little different than mothballs, but it acts very similar. But it really just targets like your wax moths. So you can stack that, your extra supers of comb, you can stack those up, put a little plate or something with some of that on there. You don't want to dump that stuff right on top of your frames, but I use like a paper plate, dump that on there, put the lid on it to where it's mostly sealed up, and then check it once a week, because those crystals will dissipate. They'll turn it straight to gas, and when it's all gone, put another little scoop on there. Just keep the wax moths away. So yeah, say for example, when you're coming into the summer months and the nectar flow is slowed way down, you've harvested a bunch of honey. You don't want to put that. You don't want to put all those empty frames back on the hives, because they're not going to fill it up. The worst thing for a hive is having too much space to defend. If there's too much space for them to defend, they can't do a good job of it. Wax moths will move in. They'll get robbed out from other bees. So then you want to store that comb until your next nectar flow, when you'll need to put it back on there for honey production. You don't want to feed while you're trying to make honey. So when your nectar flow starts, you want your honey to be made from nectar, not from sugar water. Not to say that it's not going to hurt you, but it's not going to have all the good stuff that nectar has in it. That nectar honey has in it. Sugar honey, it tastes great, but it's kind of bland. It doesn't really have all that full-bodied flavor. Anyway, so you don't feed while you're trying to get the bees to make honey. Now, other management to keep your bees healthy, there are things out there that are trying to kill your bees all the time. A big problem for bees is varroa mites. Varroa mites are here. They're pretty much throughout the country. They're a problem. You can buy bees that are more hygienic, that are more varroa mite resistant, but usually the trade-off is those bees will be more aggressive. It's a kind of a simple fact that you'll learn. I can't have aggressive bees here because of all the ecotourism that we do here. If I have aggressive bees here and somebody gets stung, we don't want all that to happen. So my bees have to be laid back bees. So I seek queens that are of that disposition, to where they'll be laid back. They're not going to swarm out of the hive and sting somebody half to death. Plus, I don't like getting stung. So when I'm working the bees, I'd rather not get stung. So the trade-off with that is usually those bees that have a milder disposition are not as hygienic. So they're not going to they'll have a more difficult time keeping the varroa mites at bay. There's all kinds of varroa mite strips, and like Apigard makes some packets of stuff that you can put in the hive. I go with the vaporization, oxalic acid vaporization treatment method. So I spent the money to buy one of these really fancy vaporizers, about $400. And then you get oxalic acid. You add a predetermined amount. It comes in all in the instructions to that. And then in the back of my hive, I have drilled a hole where this tube, this exit tube for the vapors will fit right in that hole, right in the back of the hive. And then once I turn that bad boy upside down, so you put the oxalic acid in these little cups. While it's upside down, you put the cup on your vaporizer. You stick that in the back of the hive. When you turn it over, that dumps that crystal down into this very hot copper bucket, and it turns to vapor very quickly. And the bees don't exceptionally like it, but it's not harmful to them. But anytime that vapor hits that varroa mite, it kills that varroa mite instantly. It also forces those bees to groom themselves. So in the process of grooming themselves, they'll dislodge any varroa mites that didn't get killed by, sorry, there's a fly. The flying insect I don't like so much. Anyway, just keeping them healthy. If your varroa mite concentration gets more than about 5 or 6% of the bees that have a mite on them, it can cause colony collapse. The whole colony can collapse. Then you'll lose your bees. Usually, if you start seeing the evidence of wax moths, usually the wax moths are a secondary problem. Usually that hive is weakened from some other, whether maybe they got robbed out and got into a weakened state. Maybe they got a high varroa mite load, which got them in a weakened state, and then the wax moths will move in and take over the rest. All right, so if you do go down the route of using oxalic acid vaporization to treat varroa mites, you definitely want to invest in a good N95 mask, because inhaling those vapors can cause things like kidney stones. I have a cousin who figured that out, very painfully figured that out. So yeah, you don't want to inhale those vapors. That's not the kind of vapes you want to inhale. So oxalic acid, vaporizer, treat your bees. I treat my bees about 3 times a year. Sometimes more often than that, depending on time, but time is my most limiting factor, so usually they get 3 times a year. They stay pretty healthy that way. You can do it more often, but I wouldn't do it less often than 3 times a year. All right, other equipment that you're going to need when you're beekeeping, you're going to need a smoker. Basically, and I believe this is a Dadant brand. So there's Dadant, Maxent, there's all kinds of brands of bee equipment out there. This one has a nice, good, strong bellows that puts out a lot of air. Smoke. What smoke does to bees is it sends them into panic mode. Because usually where there's smoke, there's fire, right? So they've evolved when they smell smoke, oh my gosh, my house is burning. Gather all the important stuff and let's leave quickly. Well, for them, it's not titles and marriage license and birth certificates. For them, it's their resources. It's the honey. So when they smell that smoke, they gorge themselves. Well, when they gorge themselves, it's kind of like after Thanksgiving meal, they get a little lethargic. So they're less likely to sting you. So smoking, you don't have to do that. I do. Again, I don't like getting stung. So it just helps get them in the right frame of mind, and ensures that doesn't ensure that I don't get stung, but it helps not get stung a bunch. So a good smoker. I got a torch here that I bought to get my my fire started in my smoker. What I use now, people will tell you use all kinds of stuff, and I like for it to smell good, the smoke, because you're gonna get some hits from it because it's a smoker and it's right in your face a lot of times. I use the same wood pellets that I use in my smoker, in my Traeger, my Oklahoma Joe, whatever kind of smoker you got. Buy those hardwood pellets. That way, when you're beekeeping, you're getting hungry the whole time because it smells like barbecue. Just good trick. But you can use anything. You can take some of these smaller oak branches, break it up small, put it down in there and get it. So as long as it makes smoke, you can use it. They also sell all kinds of products. So now say you are going to go down the route of catching your own bees instead of buying your own bees. Say you're kind of like me, you're a broke redneck like me and couldn't afford to buy, hundreds of dollars worth of beehives, thousands of dollars worth of beehives, and you catch your own bees. Say you're going through that RV trailer, I've done that, or you're going through the wall of that old garage, I've done that too, or you're getting them out of a tree. If you see that queen, you want to get you a little queen catcher. So it's just a little cage. It almost looks like one of those hair clips things, but anyway, you can put that over that queen, let it catch her in there, and then the hive is yours. If you can get that queen captured, you move that queen wherever you want to, as long as it's within a short distance. You can put it in your super right next to where the old hive was. Put that queen down there. All those bees will smell the pheromones. They'll all move over there. Then they're your bees. You can also transport the bees yourself if you have limited time. But anyway, I don't use them that much, but some people do. These are frame grabbers. So how they work is basically they grab the frame. What you will find is over time, the bees they like to keep a tight house. They like it to be kind of airproof, right? Same way with our house. We don't like the inside coming to the outside, or the outside coming to the inside. Either way, so they will stick everything together with a wax product. It's called propolis. It's not the same thing as the wax that they use for comb. It's kind of like a wax glue. So they'll stick everything together. They'll stick the frames to each other. They'll stick the frames to the box. So a lot of times it takes a little extra prying. Again, that's what I use. Basically, just use the J hook most of the time. I will put it in there like that, pry it up, grab it there, do the same thing over here, grab it there, and pull it up. You can also use these grabbers. Do the same thing there. Pry it up, pull it out. Okay. I don't use these very much, but I do sometimes. Also, something that I've used some, but not all the time, is for queen marking. Okay, this is basically a paint pen. So you can get online and find out because there's a certain color for every year, and those colors rotate. So I think last year it was white. I'm not sure what it is this year. I haven't looked it up. If you're buying queens, you can buy the queens. A lot of times you can buy the queens already marked. It's going to cost you another $5 per queen, but it saves you the trouble of marking the queen yourself. You want to mark the queen so you know how old she is. It makes it easier to spot her when she's in the hive, so you can check on, make sure she's still in there. Obviously, if you mark the queen and you go back in your hive 2 weeks later and you find a queen that's not marked, guess what? Your queen's dead and they've made their own. That does happen. So this is basically what this is, and we'll try to get some closer footage of it. But it's a round cage. It has a mesh. It has a bunch of they're basically nails. So say that queen is, you pulled out the frame. Oh, there's the queen. Oh my gosh, look at her move. And I'll put that around her, press it into the comb, being careful not to squish her, but you just want to press it in just enough to pin her, to where she's kind of pinned in place where she can't really move, but not hard enough to damage her, because you don't want to damage your queen. And then between whichever her thorax, on the top side of her thorax, whichever mesh it's between, then you take your paint pen, you just dab a little dot of paint on her back, on her thorax, and then she's marked. That will stay there until it wears off, which it takes years for it to wear off. And by then you should already have put a new queen in there. I try to replace my queens every year. Occasionally it's every other year, depending on my finances. But it's good to make sure that it's good to be sure that you have a nice, healthy queen in your hive. A fresh new queen in your hive. There's a whole process to introducing a queen to an already established hive. Don't have enough time to get into it today. Again, come back and see us on a workshop. We'll get into it. Honey production. That's what we have bees for, right? The good stuff. Okay. This is kind of some dark honey, but this is this year's honey back in the spring. Bees had to work really hard to get this. That's why it's kind of a dark color. But it's very tasty. So, when you're getting into nectar flow and your hive is established enough, and let me back up a little bit. I would not try to collect honey off a hive unless it's already 2 super strong. That's 2 supers that has brood, that's filled up with brood, pollen, and honey or nectar. When you get 20 frames of resources in baby bees, that hive is strong enough. In my opinion, that hive is strong enough, and that needs to be deep frames too, deep supers as well. That hive is strong enough where you can collect some honey when the nectar flow starts. So, say the nectar flow has started. And my hive is good and strong. They're ready to start working for me now, not for themselves. What I'll do is on top of my uppermost brood super, I will put a queen excluder. So this is basically, it's been figured out, and scientists a whole lot smarter than me figured it out a long time ago, that a certain gap in this mesh, a certain distance apart, the queen can't get through it. She can't get through it, but all the workers can. So we'll put that down on top of the brood super. Then I got my honey super. I put it on top. Then I put the inner cover back on and the lid back on and say, get to work. Now it's best when you put your honey super on there, you put frames in that honey super that's already got comb drawn out, because that's going to save a lot of nectar. So instead of that nectar going to form more comb, now it's going straight into honey production. So your honey super will fill up a lot quicker if you've already got drawn out comb on those frames. So now say that you are ready to extract some honey. You've collected your honey super, and now what do you do? How do you get the honey out of the comb? Well, if you're in a top bar hive, it's kind of another negative for top bar hives. You leave a couple of inches of comb and honey on the frame, so they don't have to start completely over, and you cut it off and you hand squeeze it. And they may have all kinds of strains for honey to make sure you don't have too much comb in there. If you just want honey, some people like to have comb in their honey, which is fine. I prefer my honey to be not chewy. But if you're working with a Langston hive like these, you take those frames out. They make all kinds of decapping tools, and back when we only had 3 or 4 hives here on the ranch for a long time, what we used was a dinner fork. So you'll hold that frame over a bowl where you can collect some of the honey that runs out, hold it over the bowl, and you'll just rake the caps off with a dinner fork. They actually make decappers that are the expanded version of a dinner fork. They make those. They also make machines, actually electronic machines. That now, if you're going to go with one of those that cost $1,500, you better have a lot of bees to afford that. Otherwise, you're never going to make your money back. However, I can't remember exactly how much this costs. This is from, let me see where it's from. Simple Harmony Farms. This is a decapper, and basically what it is 2 rollers. That's blades, and those blades are spaced the right distance to where it slices through the caps. Okay. The benefit with this decapper is you don't have a lot of wasted comb. If you're raking at it with a fork or one of those decapping tools, you're going to rake off a lot of comb that's going to be just left over, and the bees won't be able to use it again. With this device, it doesn't take away a lot of comb, so it can be reused. The bees, you put that frame back in your honey super after you've extracted the honey, and the bees clean it up a little bit, and they go right back to filling it back up. Again, comb is very important. I can't stress it enough how important having good comb is to your bees. This is a centrifugal extractor. I can't say that word. It spins the honey out of the frames. Once you've decapped it, you can put the frames in there, and we'll get a closer look at it here in a minute. You put the frames in there, you turn the handle, and it spins, right? You want it to spin really quick, because honey's kind of viscous, and it needs to spin pretty fast to sling that honey out of the comb onto the sides of the extractor. It runs down. You have a valve. opens up per se. I don't use this one anymore because I bought me one of those big fancy electric ones. So then you run it through a strainer to get the little pieces of comb out of it, and bottle it up and put it on your peanut butter sandwich. That's how I like it. Peanut butter and honey sandwiches are great. This is the end result. This is the good stuff. There's a lot more about beekeeping. It's fantastic if you're into bees. I wasn't necessarily into bees, but once I got started with it, I'm a beekeeper. I love it. Be a beekeeper, not a bee haver. Okay, there's a difference. If you're going to be a responsible beekeeper, maximum amount of time between you actually looking at your bees is 2 weeks. You need to be looking at your bees every 2 weeks. I try to get into them once a week. Just check on them. If it's just to pop the top and say, hey girls, how's it going today? You can see, if you get into them once a week, you can start to notice if they're declining, whether you need to take space away, or maybe they're too full. I need to add some space. The difference a week makes in nectar flow season is tremendous. They can fill up an entire deep honey super in 1 week, sometimes less than a week if there's a strong nectar flow. If they run out of room, they're going to leave. So again, if you want to have bees, if you want to make some honey, if you want to have healthy bees, you've got to tend to them. It's just like having livestock. Okay, you don't buy 50 cows and turn them loose on your 1,000 acres, and then go buy once every couple months. Say, hey, no, that doesn't work. Same thing with bees. Okay, you're in charge of those. It's your responsibility. These can be dangerous animals. All right, if your hive swarms because they run out of room, there will still be a lot of bees left over, and many times those bees left over, because there's going to be a lot of brood left over, those bees will hatch out. Oh, where's mama? They'll make their own queen. Well, when they make their own queen through a super procedure like that, that queen, when she comes out of the queen cell, she's not bred. She's not fertile. She can't lay eggs that'll make bees. She has to go on a maiden flight. And if she goes on a maiden flight and she breeds with a drone from an Africanized colony of bees, guess what? All of her baby bees will be super aggressive, to where you can't get within 30 yards of them, and they're going to swarm out of there and try to sting you to death. Okay? So again, being a responsible beekeeper is keeping it safe, keeping a safe environment, making honey, having healthy bees. And that's all I got to say about that. Thank y'all for joining us for another episode of Leopold Live. Look for us again. We'll be around. Come see us out on the ranch too.